Hey everybody, Badger here. So I had a great, wonderful stream this weekend. I had a great amount of fun, but then I had to go back to work for however long I have this job for. Although they sent me home almost immediately this afternoon. They were like, "Yeah, you're good after 12:30," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's coming. It's coming pretty soon. They're gonna get all the work they can out of me, and then they're gonna give me the boot." That's exactly what's gonna go on. Yeah, look, y'all, I've been through it before. I know how that goes. I'm surprised that's still a thing, though. The phasing out of the work. And then they fire you. Very interesting. Anyway, so yeah, click all the buttons, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Liking and sharing and commenting on all the uploads is the only way we get anywhere with the algorithm whatsoever. In fact, that's how you give a 1-2 punch to the algorithm's face, because it's run by a bunch of super brimo like lefties. Anyway, so yeah, and then join the channel. There's 2 tiers, cheap and cheaper. It's not how much you give, it's how many of you will, and or don't. I mean, I'll just keep trying to find work. It's whatever. What else? Join the Discord. Guaranteed notifications. Discord. Link in the description box. You know that box below the video that almost nobody reads? Yeah, get there. Look at things. Check it out. That being said, this is brand fresh and spanking new, and it is MrBallen. MrBallen. Paranormal event with proof, apparently. I guess we'll see. I mean, if MrBallen says it's proof, then, it's got to be really legit, so let's go.
In 1967, a man was digging for gold in a forest in Canada when behind him he heard this sudden commotion. It sounded like geese getting really startled and flying off in different directions. And so he put down his pickaxe, he stood up, he turned around, and what he claimed happened next is referred to as the Falcon Lake incident.
It sounds like a bunch of geese being startled. Have you ever heard a bunch of geese getting startled? It's one of the most hilarious things ever. It's all like honk, 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 honk. And they're putting their like necks all the way forward. They're like, geese are some of the most hilarious things that exist. Like in Canada, in certain places I've been to, they literally have warnings on doors because there'd be like geese in the area, like Canadian geese. They're the notorious ones. And they were just hanging out in certain spots, and people would like be told, hey, don't go this way. The goose will attack, or the geese will attack you. Like, and they're just chilling out there, just honk. Geese are the most hilarious thing ever. I don't know. Just check out goose videos. Maybe that's what I'll do on the live stream today, is like goose videos of just geese being geese. They're hilarious. Anyway, let's keep going.
And it's considered to be one of the most credible paranormal stories of all time. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please ask the like button if you can borrow their favorite DVD, but instead of watching it, use it as a frisbee with your dog, and then return it. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. Just before
Love MrBallen's intro still.
11 p.m. at night on May 20th, 1967, a 50-year-old man named Stephen McCulloch staggered into the Misericordia Hospital in Winnipeg, Canada. Stephen was so physically weak that his oldest son, Mark, was there with him, physically holding him up, carrying him into the hospital. When the nurses at the front desk saw the pair walk in, they immediately got up and walked around their desk over to these two guys and said, "Hey, what's going on? What's wrong with him?" And so Stefan at this point is so uncomfortable he can barely talk, but he takes a deep breath and then he tells the nurses that earlier that day he had been burned on his chest and stomach, and now he had this blinding headache and he was so nauseous and he could barely walk. The nurses knew clearly this is an emergency, and so they quickly ushered the pair down the hall to an exam room, and then a couple of minutes later, doctors came into the room and they asked Stefan to show them his burns. Stefan, who was already lying on his back on the exam table, slowly reaches down and grabs the bottom of his shirt and he lifts it up, and the doctors are stunned at what they see on his stomach. There was a very strange burn pattern that none of them had seen before. And so the doctors, they move in to get a better look at his injury. And as they're staring at it, they ask Stefan to explain how he got this burn. Now, what the doctors didn't realize is that Stefan was very conflicted. He knew if he told the truth about how he got this burn, then he would open himself and his family up to ridicule and skepticism. But as he's laying there and the doctors are waiting for his answer, he finally decides that the right thing to do here is just tell the truth. And so he takes a deep breath and then tells the doctors what happened to him. And by the time he was finished telling this story of what happened to his stomach, the doctors had stopped looking at his injury and instead were just standing in the middle of the room staring at Stefan with eyes wide and their mouths open. They were all literally speechless. Within 24 hours, Stefan's story had made news all over the world, and his story had attracted the attention of numerous US and Canadian secretive government agencies who were keen to interview Stefan one-on-one to really find out what he knew. In short, what Stefan claimed happened to him, dubbed the Falcon Lake incident, was a very big deal.
Yeah, you would think. But yeah, I think we've heard this story before, but in different flavors with different sayers. Yeah, I think we've heard of this one before. And I think actually MrBallen's done this before with when he was doing like his 3 different stories. He used to do like one video, 3 different stories, or 5 stories or something like that. That would be like condensed and crunched down. I believe he also has covered this before. Just very short and condensed though. Now he's going long video format for it. So yeah, I think we've heard of that before. But yeah, like, like you want to know what's hanging out in your forest burning people, you would think. Like, or if it's something useful to the government, then of course they're going to be all over it. But if it's not useful to the government, yeah, they'll take their time doing whatever they feel like, right? Especially if they're Democrats.
However, the farther this story went and the more people that heard it, the more people started to question the validity of this story. It just seemed too unbelievable that maybe Stefan is just lying or this is a hoax. And so before I tell you Stefan's actual account of what happened at Falcon Lake, I'm going to give you a little context about who Stefan was prior to the incident. Because ultimately, Stefan's credibility in your eyes will determine if you really believe what happened to him. Stefan was born in the early 20th century in Poland, and when World War II broke out, he was captured by the Nazis and put into one of their concentration camps. It was called the Gross Rosen camp, and it was located in Poland. During his time at that camp, Stefan would bear witness to the Nazis perpetrating some of the worst atrocities ever committed against humanity. In total, approximately 125,000 people were held prisoner at the Gross Rosen camp, including Stefan. And of those 125,000, 40,000 of them would be killed, primarily on site at the camp, or on a Nazi-led death march. After the camp was finally liberated in early 1945, Stefan worked as a translator for the US Army, helping them continue to liberate other concentration camps across Europe. But by 1946, Stefan was ready to leave Europe and start a new life somewhere else and put World War II behind him.
That makes sense. There was like There was a huge, and I mean giant, like expats like trend for a couple decades following World War II of people like moving out of like Europe and West and East Europe, moving out of like everywhere they could away from the war and coming to the United States or South America, Central America. So a lot of people even went to Africa as well. Um, but yeah, like man, having to live through something like that, you probably wouldn't want to stay either. I don't think. But yeah, this guy was an expat. That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. But yeah, people forget that that happened. There was like a massive exodus of people just going other places, mostly coming to the U.S. And that's how the U.S. That's part of the reason why the U.S. got such a huge boom after World War II.
And so he and his wife, who also was held in a concentration camp during World War II, fled Poland with their 3 young kids and resettled in Winnipeg, Canada. And for the next 20 years, the McCullochs lived a very peaceful life. Stefan would find work as a mechanic at a cement factory, and his wife and his kids would make many friends and fall in love with the Winnipeg community. However, the McCullochs' life would take a sudden turn for the worst on May 20th, 1967. That was the day of the Falcon Lake incident. Stefan was a very passionate amateur prospector. A prospector is someone who searches the earth for mineral deposits, usually gold or silver. Stefan would spend much of his off time traveling all over Canada to different wilderness areas to basically hike around the forests and up over the mountains, stopping to hack into the earth with his pickaxe in hope of discovering treasures underneath the surface. Now, Stefan almost never found any treasures on any of his prospecting journeys, but he wasn't really in prospecting for the riches. Stefan just loved being outdoors and being in nature. It was very calming and peaceful for him, and considering how traumatic his earlier life had been, being in the concentration camp during World War II, finding moments of peace in his life was very important to him. And so, in May of 1967, Stefan decided to go out on another one of his prospecting trips, this time to an area called Falcon Lake. Falcon Lake is a fairly large lake located about 100 miles to the east of Winnipeg, and surrounding this lake was a big forest that Stefan had heard contained silver deposits tucked away in the hillsides. And so on Friday, May 19th, Stefan was ready to go on this trip, and so he packed up all of his prospecting equipment, he said goodbye to his wife and his kids, and then he left the house and made his way to the bus stop where he hopped on a Greyhound bus. 2 hours later, he got off the bus at the stop closest to Falcon Lake, and from there, he made his way to this cheap motel that was right on the side of the highway. He got a room, he got a quick bite to eat in their cafe, and then returned to his room and went to bed. The next morning, May 20th, 1967, so the day of the Falcon Lake incident, Stefan woke up early, right around 5 a.m. And by 5:30 a.m., he had all of his equipment either in his backpack or on his belt, and he was making his way out of the motel's front doors. Right outside of this motel was the highway that ran left to right, and on the other side of that highway was this huge forest that Falcon Lake was deep inside of. And so after Stefan left the motel, he crossed over that highway and began walking into the woods. And for the next several hours, Stefan just kind of meandered his way through the woods. He wasn't on a trail. He was just using his compass to make sure he was generally walking in the direction of Falcon Lake. At around 9 a.m., so he's been hiking now for several hours, he looked up ahead and he saw there was a clearing on the side of this hill. And so Stefan walked into this clearing, and 2 things became immediately apparent. One, he was right near Falcon Lake. From his perspective on this clearing, he could look down just a couple of 100 feet, and there was the lake. And 2, the reason this clearing existed and why no trees were growing on it at all is because under his feet was just a huge rock face, like a quartz vein that was running across this hillside. And so this was like the perfect place for Stefan to begin prospecting. And so he set his things down, he got out his pickaxe, he got his welding gloves on, he put on his welding goggles as well. They protected his eyes from any rocks that were flying as he was hacking into the ground. And then he got to work. For the next couple of hours, Stefan very diligently hacked away at this big rock, but he didn't find any silver or anything else of note. And so, around 11 a.m., Stefan was hungry and tired, and so he put his pickaxe down, he took his goggles off, he took his gloves off, and he sat down on this rock facing the lake to have some lunch.
Oh, brother. I bet it felt really good, too, whether or not he brought anything back from the trip. I bet it felt real good. I bet it did. You know, and men wanting to do shit like this is considered toxic masculinity. How weird. Anyway, but yeah, there's just something about like, take for example, like I got a mountain basically in my backyard. Well, okay, I guess technically my front yard too. Whatever. There's a freaking surrounding mountain range where I live, okay? And there's a prominent one not too far away. It's like maybe a few miles out. And it goes up for like 7 or 8 miles, 10 miles in some places. I'm not talking about sheer height. I'm talking about like the distance to get up it and then finally reach a summit, right? There's nothing like, you know, throwing on my Moabs, you know, shorts, you know, a shirt, get like a canteen of water, just a canteen. I don't need too much water, honestly. And, you know, I'll have a sidearm with me, of course. Can't be too careful. Ever. And my knife, you know, and, you know, have like a backpack with stuff in it in case shit goes south. And then spending like 8 hours to 14 hours going up to a certain point and then coming back down. And just doing that. Just getting to the top. And then looking around at stuff, just just doing man shit, honestly. And then just feeling like you're on top of the planet, even though I freaking hate heights. I really hate tall places. But I could jump out of aircraft all day. It makes no sense. I know. Tell me about it. I hate being in the bird, but I love jumping out. Like, but yeah, so I get over that a little bit, and I'm like, wow, this view. Like I see a huge section of a planet within my eye view, right? Or just going out to the woods somewhere and taking a long hike. I try not to go places by myself, but a lot of people are more busy than I am nowadays. Although pretty soon I'll be very busy, so I'll be more miserable probably. But yeah, freaking there's just something about it. I bet you he felt so damn good. Whether or not he brought anything back with him, just finding a spot where maybe there's something and digging into it. And the hike out there, hiking around, enjoying nature, just hanging out, you know, chilling, relaxing, and decompressing to a huge degree. I bet that was some of the best times of his life. I don't know what his wife was like, so... Well, then again, they're technically Eastern European. Or, well, okay, mainland European, I guess you could... Yeah, technically, yeah. Yeah, no, he said Poland. So, yeah. Yeah, European. But back then, European. Different time. So she's probably a good woman, but there's just something else to it, right? I don't know how to explain it. I'm probably going to fail and piss a lot of people off, whatever. I'll just stop right here and say, I bet you anything it felt good. Let's just go. I'll stop rambling.
And as he sat there enjoying his food, all he could hear in the distance were the sound of a few geese down on the lake making some noise, but...
Canadian geese. The Canadian terrors. Aren't they adorable, though? They're adorable, but they will literally, like, run up to you and be like... like... I don't know. You'd have to see a goose doing it to understand what I mean. But they like stretch their head up, their neck out, and they flap their wings. They're like, you know, they'll start hissing at you and try to bite you and stuff. They can be really ferocious if they want to be.
Other than that, it was totally quiet. After he was done eating, he put his gear back on and got back to work. About an hour later, at around 12:15 p.m., Stefan was still hacking away at the rock when, despite all the noise he was making as he smashed the ground with his pickaxe, he could hear a really loud commotion coming from behind him. And it turned out when he stopped the pickaxe, the commotion sounded like geese honking and going wild. And so he dropped his pickaxe, he took his goggles, put them up on his forehead, and then he stood up and he turned around and he looked down towards the lake where he heard all these geese going crazy. And the first thing he noticed was there were some geese on the lake that appeared to be flying off in different directions like they had been startled. But what really immediately caught his attention was not the geese, but what had very likely startled the geese. And that was two bright, glowing red objects that were flying slowly across the lake towards him, kind of roughly over where the geese were. Yesterday...
Oh, here they come. Them damn aliens. Or whatever they are. Who knows what they are? For all we know, they're like super advanced drones that are out of control or something, because the government's pretty incompetent at doing things competently. You know what I'm saying?
My pet frog, Seagull Lung, and I went to the frog park. And as I watched old Lungy gallop over to his other frog friends to join their game of Hi-Li, I noticed something very distressing. Poor...
Hi-Li? What the hell? I gotta hear that again. Let's go.
Lung and I went to the frog park. And as I watched old Lungy gallop over to his other frog friends to join their game of Hi-Li, I noticed something very distressing. Poor old Seagull Lung was the only frog not in a Halloween costume. And so immediately my parental instincts kicked in and I sprinted over and ripped old Lungy off the Hi-Li field. And then before long, we were speeding home at over 100 miles per hour where we crashed into the front of the house. And then after climbing out of the twisted steel and wreckage, me and old Lungy hobbled over to our steam-powered laptop, and after getting that bad boy fired up, I was on the internet looking for the best Wolverine costume for frogs money could buy.
He said steam-powered laptop. Actually, technically, everything nowadays is still steam-powered. Did you know that? Technically, we've been using steam engines forever. Or am I wrong about that? I'm pretty sure. Like, you know, the nuclear power plants, they boil water to the nth degree, creates vapor and steam, and it's used to propel, you know, make stuff go round and round and round. You know, it does a turbine thingy, whatever. What else? You know, gas-powered vehicles rely on a turbine and pressure and air, which is a liquid that contains water. So yeah, technically we never got rid of steam engines. We've been using them the past like 100 and whatever years. Isn't that nuts? So I guess technically, like my computer, your laptop, your phone, all that kind of stuff, the power comes from where? Where does the electricity come from? Steam engines. Well, shit, he's not wrong.
But as I was browsing, I got hit. Bah, 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 by a pua. Bah, bah. Luckily, old Lungy slapped me right in the coccyx and said, "Papa, tu vois, NordVPN."
Papa, tu dois avoir.
Papa, tu dois avoir. Papa.
Right in the coccyx. This stuff's insane. Oh, man. You gotta love MrBallen. He's hilarious.
Tu dois avoir NordVPN, which of course in French means, Dad, we need to sign up for NordVPN. A VPN, or virtual private network, is a service that keeps you safe while you browse the internet. And NordVPN is the brand name in the space. Not only will NordVPN ensure all of your information stays safely behind their next generation wall of encryption, but also, most importantly, through their latest feature called Threat Protection, they will automatically block all those disgusting puas that keep preventing us from purchasing the best things in life.
Puas. Man, you gotta love MrBallen.
like Halloween costumes for frogs. So, be like me and old Lungy and sign up for NordVPN today. Right now, you can get a 2-year plan for a huge discount plus 4 additional months for free when you go to nordvpn.com/MrBallen. And it's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/MrBallen or click the link in the description below. Okay, back to the story. And now these objects, they were cylindrical. They appeared to be about maybe 30 or 40 feet wide. They didn't have any sort of emission coming off of them. They weren't making any noise. They were just kind of slowly making their way over towards where Stefan was. Now, as Stefan is watching this happen, he wasn't fearful. He assumed those have to be military aircraft. As it was, this part of Canada, Falcon Lake, is very remote. There's not many people around. And so logically, it made sense that perhaps there's a military that's doing training exercises in this area. And so feeling much more intrigued than fearful, Stefan just continued to watch as these red aircraft got closer and closer to his side of the lake. And then when these two craft were about 200 feet away from where Stefan was standing, they came to a stop and they were just hovering in the air. And then one of the craft suddenly turned orange and began going up into the clouds, and then at some point just vanished. And then the other craft, instead of going up, just continued descending very slowly, now very clearly towards this open rock face that Stefan was standing on. Now again, Stefan was totally convinced that these were military aircraft, conducting some sort of exercise, and so he's not fearful. He is just intrigued by what he's seeing.
As anyone really would be. People are curious. That's the thing. Which also gets lots and lots of people killed every year, unfortunately. Safety and security. Do not compromise. So yeah, if you're going to be a dummy and give in to curiosity and be the cat that the dog red jumped up on top of the wall and snatched out of, at least have a plan, at least bring people with you and be armed and decently trained on how to use such arms. And make sure you got survival kits with you of some kind. That's about all I can tell you. Okay, now carry on doing people stuff.
And in fact, by this point, he had convinced himself that this second aircraft that was now coming down to land on these rocks must have experienced some sort of issue, and they were landing in order to fix it. And Stefan even thought to himself, well, hey, I'm a mechanic. Maybe I can help the pilot or pilots with whatever's going on with their craft. Once the craft finally did touch down on the rocks about 150 feet away from Stefan, it changed colors from red to stainless steel with an orange glow around the outside of the aircraft. And inside of this craft, a really bright purple light came on that Stefan was only aware of because there was a couple of small holes on the outside of this craft where this purple light was coming through. But these little rays of purple light coming out of this craft were so bright that it actually was hard for Stefan to look directly at the craft. And so his welding goggles were still on his forehead, so he pulled them down, put them over his eyes, and his welding goggles had a kind of tint to them, so it was like he was looking through sunglasses, and with those on, he was able to continue looking at the craft. And so through his goggles, Stefan is still just standing in the same spot where he first saw these craft, and he's watching this craft that's now landed 150 feet away from him, and he's fully expecting any minute for the pilot or pilots to come out of the craft and explain what's going on. But at first, nothing happens. And so Stefan is just standing there waiting for something to happen when he realizes he has his sketchbook in his pocket. Stefan liked to bring his sketchbook along on his prospecting trips because he liked to sketch things. And so he figured while he waited for the pilot or pilots to emerge, he would sketch the craft. And so for the next couple of minutes, that's what he did. And then after he was done sketching it, he put his sketchbook away, and then really nothing happened for about another 30 minutes. He just stood there, and the craft remained motionless.
I wonder what it is that makes purple light. Is there an explanation for that? Actually, I could probably look this up instead of... because there's nobody live with me right now. What makes purple light? There's a wiki religions. Whoa, that's something else. Oh, hey, look, I'm halfway transparent because I forgot about the green screen and I'm wearing green. Yeah, funny. I get it. I get it. Let me see. Okay. What makes purple light naturally? Damn, it doesn't. I'm probably looking it up the wrong way. Huh, interesting. Very interesting. I'm not finding anything that would explain why there would be any type of light that's purple. And I'm not thinking of like mixing together color schemes to make another color, right? I'm talking about like naturally occurring that way. Like, is there like some special photons and electrons that do it? Light particles that are interacting a certain way that generate that light. I know that for like different types of like chemical light, you need certain types of chemicals to interact, right? And then it creates a light that way, kind of like our chem lights that we use in the military. We got purple, yellow, green, red, orange, whatever color we want, really. Hell, we even have chem lights that are infrared, and so you can like make what we call a buzzsaw. You take like an IR chem light, you put it at the end of some 550, and then when you've like cleared portion of a building as a signal, you can take the IR chem light and wave it around, and it makes like a little circle of IR that everybody will recognize and see, and then the rest of the team will come in. So yeah, I'm just wondering, does anybody have an answer to that question? What can make light naturally be exhibited as the color purple? I'd like to have an answer to that.
But after about 30 minutes of the craft having landed, it opened. There was like a sliding door on the side of the craft facing Stefan, and it revealed the beautiful, bright purple interior of this craft. But from Stefan's perspective, because of how bright the lights were and how far away he was, he couldn't tell what was inside of the craft. But Stefan's thinking, okay, clearly now the pilot or pilots are coming outside. And so Stefan felt really relieved, and he was just standing there waiting to talk to whoever was inside. But, again, nothing happened. And so now, feeling just plain curious, Stefan decided, you know what, I'm going to walk over there, and I'm going to yell into this open door to the pilot or pilots inside and make sure they're okay. And so he starts slowly making his way across the rock face towards this craft and this open door. And when he gets about 60 feet away from the craft, he suddenly stops because now he can hear from inside of this craft the sound of two voices talking to each other. He can't really tell what they're saying, but very clearly there is communication happening inside of this craft. And so Stefan assumed that must be the pilots, and so he called out to them in English. And the second Stefan yelled out to this craft, the voices immediately came to a stop, and they did not respond to Stefan. And so Stefan is calling out to them in English, hey, are you okay? What are you doing in there? And when English didn't work, Stefan called out in Russian. He called out in German, Italian, French, Ukrainian. And when all of those didn't work, he went back to English and just continued kind of calling out, trying to get them to please come out and talk to him.
This man's speaking like 7 languages over here. Bub. Speaking 7 languages. 7 languages. Trying to talk to something that's probably not from our planet. But still, the most impressive part is he's speaking 7 languages. That's incredible. I don't care who you are. That's some insane level of linguistic skill. Seriously. And I struggle to speak like 3.
But he got no response and no one came out of the craft. And so at this point, Stefan thought, okay, I'm totally committed, so I need to keep going and make sure the pilot or pilots are okay. And so he continued walking closer and closer to this open door of the craft. And when he got about 10 feet away, he was suddenly struck by the incredible craftsmanship of this craft. He couldn't see any rivets anywhere on this amazing piece of machinery, meaning this craft appeared like it had somehow been carved out of one enormous piece of steel, which seemed totally impossible. Also, Stefan noticed there were no insignia on the outside of this craft. There was no flag or anything kind of denoting who was flying it. There was really nothing on the outside of the craft. But Stefan just kept on going until he was standing right outside of this open door. He's only a couple feet away from it, and now he's looking directly inside, and he doesn't see the pilot or pilots. And in fact, because of how bright this purple light is coming out, even with his goggles, it's really hard to see what's inside of this craft. But he can clearly see inside there is some sort of panel in the back of the craft with lots of flashing lights, almost like a computer, and there were other kind of columns of light moving around inside the craft at different angles. But
the thing sounds very much alien to me. Or actually, you know what? You know one of the reasons, purple light and all that kind of stuff? Look up scenes from from the game Halo and like getting on like Covenant ships. Or like Covenant ship design and all that kind of stuff. And this sounds not too dissimilar from that. Because like everything inside an alien ship is like these purple hues and all that kind of stuff. And that's something that we conjured up from our own brains, right? Was the aliens from Halo and all the variations and stuff. Very interesting. It's alien, but it's not. What do y'all think, though? What do y'all think? Y'all let me know. But this sounds fantastically like something I would find in like a video game nowadays. Speaking of which, I'm going to start doing a gaming stream after this one, so hope to see you there.
after looking in this craft for only a few seconds, the door suddenly slid shut. And then Stefan, without really thinking about it, reached out and touched the craft. And the second he did that, two things happened. One, the hand that he touched the craft with, he was wearing a big welding glove, and the second he made contact with that craft, the leather glove began to melt. Not even catch on fire, it just instantly began to melt. And so he began frantically ripping the glove off to get it off of him to avoid injury. And then the second thing that happened is the craft began rotating counterclockwise until this vent that was on the outside of the craft, one of the very few things that was on the outside of the craft that actually Stefan had noted in his sketch. He had drawn this grate that sat on the outside of the craft. This grate rotated around until it was aimed directly at Stefan. Now, to picture this grate, picture like a vent you would see inside of a building where air conditioning blows air out of, right? It's kind of like that same size, the size of a license plate on a car. And instead of there being vertical slats along the vent, like you would see with an air conditioning vent cover, on this vent, on this craft, it was like a checkerboard pattern with little buttonholes all over this vent. And so Stefan is looking at this vent, and then suddenly something shoots through the vent, like an explosion that hits him square in the chest and lights him on fire. His shirt is literally in flames, and so Stefan is frantically trying to rip off his shirt. He throws it on the ground, he's stomping the flame, and as he's doing that, he looks up and sees this craft has somehow immediately shot into the sky and is now disappearing into the clouds. Now, Stefan had no idea what just happened. All he knew is his chest and his stomach now hurt tremendously. But before he could deal with that, he developed this unbelievable headache. He suddenly felt so nauseous, and he felt delirious, like he was drunk.
Sounds like radiation poisoning. Like possibly radiation poisoning. That's what it sounds like. But I could be wrong.
Trying not to panic, Stefan, who now is shirtless and badly burned, he ran over and grabbed some of his things, and then he began heading back into the woods to make his way back towards the motel. It would take him several hours of stumbling through the forest, stopping periodically to vomit, but he would eventually reach the highway, he would cross over, and he would make his way into the motel right around 4 p.m. And when he got there, he made his way into the cafe, and he asked the staff if they knew where the nearest doctor was. These staff members would later tell investigators that when Stefan came tumbling into the cafe without his shirt on, looking totally horrible, they assumed he was drunk. But after talking to him, he didn't smell at all like alcohol. Instead, he reeked of this horrible sulfur smell. The staff would tell Stefan that the nearest doctor was 45 miles away. And so at this point, Stefan decided his best bet was actually to just get on a bus and go back to Winnipeg, where his family could take him to the nearest hospital. And so somehow, Stefan managed to make his way to the bus stop. He hopped on a Greyhound bus, he went to Winnipeg, and then his oldest son, Mark, met him at the bus stop and practically carried him into the hospital.
So, if he got like a dose of radiation, like a heavy one, he's like a walking radiation counter at this point. Bub. That's scary. My demon kid keeps going off. I don't know if y'all can hear him, but you hear like da na 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 na. And it's probably because of the freaking storm we got going on outside. Yeah, I got a demon kid, and my son is terrified of him. They did a good job with it. Doesn't scare me, but it looks cool.
The very strange checkerboard burn pattern found on Stefan's abdomen, where he claims this craft turned its vent and fired on him, were determined not to be thermal burns, meaning he didn't get them from something hot touching his skin, like everyone initially suspected. Instead, they were determined to be chemical burns, but literally no one, doctors, scientists, government agencies, no one could figure out what chemical actually burned his skin. In fact, no one was ever able to actually identify what was causing all of these ailments that Stefan was complaining of, from the headache to the nausea to the weakness to these burns. And he was tested for basically everything, from radiation poisoning to very common ailments and illnesses, and everything came back negative.
So he doesn't have radiation poisoning or what? Because all of that sounds like radiation poisoning. But instead, they described it more like chemical burns. Chemical, huh? Interesting. Chemical. So, like, you can make lasers from chemicals. So you got shot by a literal like chemical laser beam, essentially. Or maybe that's the exhaust, like the exhaust from the aircraft. You know, spinning up and then taking off. It emits that as like kind of like waste, I guess you could say, or kind of like emission. You know, there is no source of energy or power or nothing like that that doesn't give off some kind of emission or something, right? Or there's no trade-off too. Like people say, oh, solar's clean. Did you know they have expiration dates on solar panels? You can only have them so long before they call it quits. And, you know, for every couple of years, like their percentage of efficiency goes down, and it can spike downwards as well. So, yeah, windmills, okay, wind farms, whatever, wind power turbines and stuff. Did you know that they still use petroleum products to keep them running? You gotta lubricate everything, right? You gotta use oil and grease, some kind. Oh, yeah, rubber gaskets. Those are made from oil. The plastics inside them, those are made from petroleum power. You know, like nothing energy-wise comes without some kind of cost or consequence or some kind of emission of some kind or waste product, right? There is nothing on this planet that's like that. Even nuclear, the most, the best one that we got, the best bang for our buck is nuclear power and fossil fuel. That's the absolute best bang for our buck. So I'm just wondering, like, if the craft, to be able to do what it's able to do, like basically warp its way through reality like it's nothing, through time and space, to manipulate it to such a degree to be able to move like that. I wonder what the waste product of that would be. If somebody has an answer for that, let me know, because I'm scratching my head here.
Experts would go out to Falcon Lake, to the area that Stefan described seeing this craft, and sure enough, they would find an open rock face, and right around the area that Stefan described was this circular burn pattern, as if something had been perched right there that shot some sort of exhaust into the ground, and the area around this landing site was determined to be highly radioactive, although it is assumed that the reason that area is radioactive is because there is a vein of radium that runs underneath the rocks near the area. However, what no one could explain away were the 3 identical pieces of what looked like metal, which actually turned out to be a very rare type of silver, that were located near this burn circle. Now, even though the Falcon Lake area was known apparently for having silver deposits up in the hillsides, this silver, these 3 pieces of silver, were not from the hillsides of Falcon Lake. This silver was heavily manufactured. Someone, something, some machine had manipulated the metal to bend and be cut in a very particular way. And all 3 of these pieces of very rare silver were highly radioactive. They would also find traces of this very rare type of silver that seemed to have seeped into some of the loose rocks that were inside of that burned out circle, almost like the silver had melted into the rock. But despite these pieces of evidence that do seem to suggest that Stefan really did see some craft land on these rocks, and despite the fact that the US government and the Canadian government both thoroughly investigated this case and they were not able to debunk it, they basically said, well, something happened, but we don't know what. Despite all of that, Stefan and his family's lives were forever upended after this incident. Stefan was ridiculed and accused of lying and of being crazy, and his kids were unfortunately bullied at school. Shortly before Stefan died in 1999 at the age of 83, he was asked if he regretted coming forward with this story, and he would say, yes, I wish I never told anyone. But he would also say, at the time, he really felt like he had a duty to tell the world about what happened. Stefan never changed his story, and he never came out and said, I think this craft came from another world, another planet, another universe. He just said, look, I think it was an experimental aircraft. That's it. He also never made a dime on this experience. If anything, he lost money because he paid to write a 40-page pamphlet that explained what happened to him, and then he left all these copies on his porch. So if news people showed up or if nosy neighbors showed up and had questions, he would just point to the stack of the books and say, take one and read it.
Bub. Why are people hating on people for making money? Why? Just why? Look, I get it. Okay, I get it. I understand. All right, you're going to say like, oh, well, and then they're just grifting, and then you know they're lying. So people getting paid for their time to reveal something that could be detrimental to them the rest of their lives, so they deserve no recompense for that? That makes no freaking sense to me. None whatsoever. It makes no... Bob, you should have gotten at least like, I don't know, $200,000 from some newspaper agency to do like an exclusive interview or some shit. Seriously. Like, what is it with people with this stupidity mindset where it's like, oh, you shouldn't make money for doing this. No, 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 no. This is something that literally screwed up the rest of his life. Literally. And he didn't get paid for it? Ain't that some absolute asinine, ridiculous stuff like that makes me cantankerous. It fills me with choler. Makes me choleric. Anyway, let's continue.
So that's going to do it. If you got something out of today's episode and you haven't done this already, please ask the like button if you can borrow their favorite DVD, but instead of watching it, use it to play Frisbee with your dog and then return it. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. We have a podcast called the MrBallen Podcast that puts out brand new podcast.
Oh yeah, I gotta check that out sometime. Do like some kind of content with that. But there we go. All of his link. Look, I'm gonna link his video in the description box down below. So yeah, make sure you get on board with all that stuff. So yeah, make sure you get there. There we go, folks. MrBallen, paranormal event with proof. Came out, I believe, today, or was it yesterday? What is today? I'm lost. I'm always lost. I'm old. So, yeah, it came out yesterday. I'm late to the train, but whatever. For those of y'all that watch this, thank you. I love you. I enjoy you. I have fun with you guys. I do. Drunk, sober, or in between. I have a great time with y'all. I appreciate you greatly. But what did y'all think? What did y'all think? Y'all let me know. I'm going to do like a gaming stream in about an hour or two. And probably do that until my son gets dropped off. So, yeah, look forward to that. Modern Warfare is out now, boys. Modern Warfare is out. Let's go. So, yeah, I'll be playing that for a little bit. So, yeah, make sure you click that like button, share this on all social media platforms with the trending tags. I don't care what they are. We need more eyes. We need more eyeballs to the screens. That's about it. Those are the only 2 out of 3 ways, which the third one is to comment to beat the algorithm and give it a 1-2 punch in the face and tell them, hey, we like this, so we want more people to see it. So, yeah. And then, yeah, join the channel. There's 2 tiers, cheap and cheaper. Okay human, decent human, which basically means the same thing, but whatever. It's not about how much you give, it's how many of you do. And then be good, be safe, make good life for yourselves. And I'll see y'all on the gaming stream in a little while. Or probably not. Look, not a lot of y'all check into the streams anyway, so I might as well be streaming by myself. But for those of y'all that do watch, thank you, I love you. And I'll see y'all on the next one. Let's Cat Badger out.